It's time now for the Newsmaker, in which we tackle a big story of the day in the company of a fearless commentator. Tonight, Anne Widdecombe. Now, a female teacher has been forced to apologise for saying "good afternoon, girls" at an all-girls school after being told that not everyone identified as female. One pupil stood up and challenged her to acknowledge their pronouns. So is education now institutionally woke? Anne Widdecombe joins me. And your reaction to this story, please.
Well, absolutely ludicrous. It's one of those stories that you can't really believe happened. This is a girls' school. Now, we have to assume, therefore, that they advertise that they're a girls' school, that they take in pupils on the basis that it's a girls' school, and yet you can't address them as girls. And I wouldn't be surprised if the odd pupil had complained. What appalls me about this story is that the headmistress made the teacher apologise, came in, stood with the teacher and humiliated her, basically, in front of the class. And for what? And for what? For saying, "good afternoon, girls." Now, that has reached a very silly level indeed, and my belief is the governors of this school ought to sack the head.
Well, perhaps that should be considered. We've always feared that the public sector was institutionally woke, but this is an independent private girls' school, so it suggests a wider culture within education, Anne.
Yes, and probably, I don't know, but probably they're members of the Girls' Public Day School Trust. Note the word again, girls, girls everywhere. And apparently that's fine and that's acceptable, but the instant a teacher addresses the girls as girls, that isn't. It is a nonsense. It is in the private sector as well. And this is all the fear factor, the fear of social media, the fear of being criticised. This is the fear factor playing in and just destroying common sense. And if I were a parent at that school, I would now be considering withdrawing my child. I would just say it's too big a nonsense.
And do you think this has to be dealt with at a political level? I'm sure you will support Rishi Sunak's comments recently that 100% of women don't have a penis.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the only thing I find amazing, and I said this at the Reform annual conference, I mean, the only thing I find amazing about that is it was actually worth banner headlines in a high circulation newspaper that the Prime Minister believed that a woman didn't have a male appendage. I mean, I just cannot believe that is newsworthy. We are going absolutely bonkers. And I think there does need to be a political solution. If you can't get these things managed through common sense, then regrettably, because I'm not one of those who says, if it moves, legislate. I'm not one of those. But I do think that you're going to have to legislate here to protect teachers and to protect children.
And you're now backing the Reform Party, Reform UK. They had their spring conference this weekend. What does success look like for Reform UK at the next election?
Well, first of all, of course, before that happens, we've got the local elections. We're standing up to 500 candidates in the local elections. And I think there is a real prospect at the next election of people saying, oh, for heaven's sake, let's have a real change. And I think that Reform offers the sort of common sense approach that we need.
Do you think that in time, Reform UK could replace the Conservatives as the predominant right-wing party of this country?
Well, actually, I see no Conservatives. I mean, that is the problem. I see no Conservatives. We've got two major parties in this country. One is red and the other is pale pink. I see no Conservatives. I see a party that believes in high tax, high spend, a controlling thought, all the things that Conservatives used to be against.
Indeed. What about, though, and it's the perennial question, Anne, about whether support for Reform UK will hand the keys of number 10 to Keir Starmer?
Well, if it does, it won't be the Conservatives who've lost out because there are no Conservatives. I mean, that is the point.
But Anne, Anne, I hate to interrupt you in your flow, but if you had to choose between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who can't define a woman, who can define a woman, and Prime Minister, I do agree, it's easy to confuse them, and Starmer, who can't, your choice, Prime Minister Starmer, Prime Minister Sunak. Which is the lesser of two evils?
Reform is better than either. So you're not going to trap me that easily,
But it
Mark.
ain't going to happen, Anne. There will be no Reform UK Prime Minister. There will be no Prime Minister Richard Tice, not for the next few years anyway. So you makes your choices and you pays your money. Who's it going to be? Sunak or Starmer?
Mark, it may take Reform a few years. I don't think any of us would say.
And a
that it's gonna
5-year
happen.
Labour government brought about by Reform UK.
No, Mark, I'm going to finish. You've asked me a question. Kindly hear the answer. It may well take a few years. Nobody says it's going to happen tomorrow. But this I do know. If we don't back them, if we don't promote them, if we don't vote for common sense, for saving the union, for a real Brexit, if we don't vote for those things, then they're never going to happen, ever. That's all I know.
Well, Anne, I will hand it to you. You absolutely embody common sense, which is why we love having you on the show every Sunday night as our fearless commentator, of course, the newsmaker every Sunday night, former Conservative government minister, now supporter of Reform UK, Anne Widdecombe. Thanks, Anne. We'll see you in a week's time.